All right, folks, we're here live with our first fireside chat with ISD. We've got John over there, and we've got Matt right there. And so we're going to first get into some topics, and then if you're there, you got an opportunity to ask questions. You can go into the chat, ask whatever questions you want, and we'll have Matt and John answer them. I'm not going to be really involved in this other than to kind of bring up the topics, and we'll let these two do all the talking. So that's the way it's going to go. Once again, if you are not a member or a subscriber of IrishSportsDaily.com, stop by and check it out. Also, you can check out all our free content as well. Click on that, read whatever you want to check out, and if you're interested, sign up for that. Also, you can sign up for our YouTube channel just by clicking on the subscribe button below what you're watching there, and it doesn't cost you anything, and it also allows you the opportunity to jump in and ask questions in the chat. So, all right, guys, let's start with this. The first question I wanted to ask you guys is, what do you make of the season so far? Are you surprised by the results? Are you surprised by what we've seen on the field? Let's start with you, John.
Yeah, frankly, I'm surprised that Notre Dame lost this past weekend. I didn't expect it. I'd had a fairly decent track record of forecasting Notre Dame games since you guys were kind enough to bring me into the fold a couple of years ago in that regard. So, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Notre Dame turned the ball over 3 times the way it did in the first half, the way those turnovers went, where on the field those turnovers occurred. And I'm frankly surprised that Notre Dame's offensive line is not better than it is right now, 5 games into the season.
What about you, Mr. Freeman?
Yeah, I'm not overly surprised by the record at this point. I think heading into the season, I think most who follow this closely knew that Cincinnati and Wisconsin back-to-back were going to be a hell of a stretch for Notre Dame. I think also probably a lot of people underestimated Cincinnati, which, I mean, they probably still do to that point. But I think what we've seen on the field has been a surprise, offensively especially. I think there are going to be growing pains with the new defense and guys finding a comfort level going at game speed with Marcus Freeman's defense, as well as him trying to figure out what guys can and can't do. But as the great John Bryce mentioned, the offensive line, I mean, I think everybody knew it was going to take a step back. I mean, they averaged, 200 yards rushing last year a game. So, I mean, that's just a given when you lose 4 guys to the NFL. But, I mean, that step seemed likely to be like 150 yards a game or some short yardage problems here and there, not what they've been, where they've been held to under 300 yards 3 games and 9 yards total against Wisconsin. So when you combine that with the lack of pass pro, I mean, I think that's probably the biggest surprise, even though like you kind of expected it to take a step back. It's just a massive step back.
Okay. You guys have both been around the team and kind of around the locker room before and after the games. What do you get? What is your sense of how the players are seeing things right now? Let's start with you, Matt. What do you think? I mean, just kind of when you're just having your conversations off the record and just kind of talking to them.
I think things are extremely tight around the Goog right now. I think the players have kind of seemed tight all year. One observation that I've kind of noticed is like they lack the swagger that they've had in the past couple years. I don't think I'm saying like they're not confident, but it just doesn't seem like they're having as much fun as in past years. And then, I mean, I think the O-line's been a little defensive in interviews, but I think that's kind of normal just from the type of questions they're being asked. But I just think this group hasn't lost very much in the last couple of years. I'm not 100% sure they know how to handle it, which I think is a good and bad thing. I think Brian Kelly needs to kind of find a way to get them loose, and maybe that was yesterday, sending walk-ons in for interviews yesterday. So I don't know if that's going to do it, but it sounded like an impulse decision based off of what the players said. But I think he's kind of got to find a way to get the team loose and having fun again versus just you can tell they're tight.
What about you, JB? You got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think they're fairly loose and playing with some good freedom and energy on the defensive side of the ball. I also think that Tommy Rees doing a nice job with the offense. I do think they're tight or uptight on the offensive line. They've all said that they feel like they're extremely close to a breakthrough performance. Maybe that's this weekend at Virginia Tech, where they really can assert themselves on the ground. And it looked like they were starting that way against Cincinnati. They drove right down the field after opening the game with possession and had a goal to go, first and goal to go situation, and weren't even in desperation mode when they had the turnover at the goal line. But I would agree with Matt, and I would contend that not only did it seem like a rash decision, but I asked a couple of those guys about it, and it literally just happened right before they came to meet us at post-game, post-practice interviews. And look, it's never, ever, ever about the media. It's not about who we got to talk to or didn't get to talk to. But I think it's also a little bit of a dangerous situation from a perception standpoint when you lose your first game in a really long time and decide that's the point you want to send all walk-ons to talk. I would have loved it, frankly, quite a bit more if they'd sent all walk-ons to talk last week after the Wisconsin win. I think it would have had a better impact of what they were looking for.
Yeah, I think that we'll get into the walk-on stuff, I guess. Here's, people want to know. I've already seen a couple questions. So once again, folks, if you're watching and you have any questions, you can type in the chat there, ask whatever questions you may have of John and of Matt. So Matt, behind the scenes, part of our job is to gather information behind the scenes and get a feel for things and that type of thing. What have you heard kind of behind the scenes about the team, O-line, offense, defense? Do you get the sense that people are frustrated with the situation?
Yeah, and I think that behind closed doors, I think the offensive line knows that they need to get it together. And on the outside, I think they've been overly positive. But as I mentioned before, I think that's kind of expected. I mean, they're living it, they're playing, and if they didn't feel like they'd get it right, then I think that's a more significant issue. They've been dealt, they feel, some of the people I've talked to said they feel like they've been dealt a tough hand at left tackle, which obviously has been a major issue. I mean, one source put it this way: outside of quarterback, left tackle and defensive end get paid the most in the NFL. So those are the most important positions. And right now, Notre Dame's trying to swim in a hurricane. So, I mean, the best player at left tackle was a true freshman who was likely going to be the next big thing, but he got hurt. So now, through injuries and everything, the next best option is another true freshman. So I don't think that position is helping them at all, and it's kind of impacted what they can do across the line just because they don't have enough bodies to even get a two deep left tackle right now. So I think that they know they got to get it fixed, and I think it kind of starts with getting that left tackle position healthy and kind of going from there.
I think a lot of Irish fans are wondering with the walk-on situation, us getting that, if that was kind of a Brian Kelly, flipping the media the bird or something. Yeah, as far as we got a lot of negative things being said about the program and the game and that type of thing. John, did you see a different Brian Kelly after the game and the press conference on Monday? Do you think anything's changed? What are your thoughts there?
No, I mean, I'm on record as saying I think Brian Kelly is underappreciated nationally as a head coach and a program builder for what he's done. Look, he made it clear on Monday, hey, this press conference is not about an indictment of our team. We're not going to dissect every single problem of our team. And I think it's pretty easy to dissect problems of the teams in college football outside of Alabama and Georgia. It's really easy to start identifying problems of some teams everywhere you look, those two programs. I didn't really see, in my opinion, a great difference in Brian Kelly on Monday. I thought it was pretty straightforward. I thought he answered a lot of the questions relatively directly. I think it was noble of him to try and say that that the criticism on Quinn and that group is not warranted. It's 100% warranted, because for as disappointed as I've been in Notre Dame's offensive line, I would have a hard time expressing how remarkably impressed I am with Kyron Williams and what he's done in blitz pickup. And this guy has completely sacrificed his body. And on any given play, he's one of the smallest guys on the field for the Notre Dame offense. And he's been phenomenal. I mean, he had some plays where I turned to Matt in the press box at Soldier Field and would say, holy bleep, what a blitz pickup by Kyron right there. You know, that play becomes disaster instead of an incomplete pass if not for Kyron's blitz pickup right there. And Tyree has improved in that regard as well. So, yeah, it's unfair because of Notre Dame offensive line being a victim of its own success. It's been so freaking elite for so long that I think we all watching Notre Dame from near or afar tend to expect that. But also, there's a lot of reasons to say, how is the development not better? How is it to the point that you lose freshman tackle at halftime of the first game and you're this damaged 5 games into the season at that position? You've got Zeke Correll battling his butt off, but playing in a position. You've got Kane Madden 5 games into adjusting. So I just think that those things make it fair. I didn't see a great difference in Brian Kelly Monday. I don't know whose idea it was to put the walk-ons in front of us Tuesday evening inside the Goog. And again, I'm not against that. I really think a lot of those guys have great storytelling. But I just think from a teammate standpoint, it would have been more effective and been more meaningful if that move came after a win.
Yeah, yeah. Matt, I want to ask this question of you. Where do you honestly see this team is heading at this point? And why do you feel that they're heading that way?
I mean, that's a great question, Mike. I think Saturday is going to be a key for them. I think if you look at the schedule and where Notre Dame's at right now, I think they desperately needed the bye week to be this week, or at least a home game, so they can figure out the quarterback situation. I don't think if Drew Pine is, in fact, the starter on Saturday, I don't think he's a kid that's going to get rattled, but you can't hide the fact that he's inexperienced. And then, I mean, Buckner's even more experienced. So I think if you're looking to make a change, Virginia Tech's a tough place to do that. And like I said, I think it'd be much easier if it was a home game or if you had the bye week to make that change going into a road game. And I think Brian Kelly and Tommy Rees know they have to figure out the quarterback situation because that's going to drive the team outside of the O-line. And then, I mean, Kelly acknowledged that on Monday, but I think that may actually come next week on the bye week if Cone ends up starting on Saturday and doesn't come up with a big performance, just because, I mean, that's a tough ask of any quarterback to go in and start at Virginia Tech with this the current state of the offensive line. So I wouldn't blame Kelly if he started Cone, just because that experience is something that is important. But at the same time, I mean, they have to make a change heading into USC or North Carolina and get that figured out.
John, what do you think? I mean, where do you think this team is honestly heading at this point?
You know, I think, quite honestly, they're getting better and better every week on the defensive side of the ball. And I've talked to multiple Big Ten coaches about Notre Dame. I've talked to some SEC assistant coaches about Notre Dame and some other people, and they're seeing a lot of improvement from Notre Dame week to week on the defensive side of the ball. Especially, we're sitting here talking about where Notre Dame is with all these injuries at the left tackle position on the offensive line, and it's significant. But the fact of the matter is they're missing 3 really important linebackers on the defensive side of the ball, and yet I think the defense is playing better every single week. So, you know, I'm not beating on those guys. I'm not overly beat on a single position group, but to me, Notre Dame's not undefeated right now, and a lot of that is because of the offensive line. I could see wanting to start Jack Cone, but if you made the decision to move away from him this past Saturday at home against Cincinnati and you never went back to him in the second half, and you feel like that's where things are, you get all 3 guys ready to play on Saturday. But if you're going to start Drew Pine, I think this is a perfect opportunity to start Drew Pine.
It's going to be interesting because I did a little digging, obviously, this week too. And they, from everything that I've heard, Pine just didn't actually grade out that well based off of their grades. Missed some reads that probably should have happened. He should have made. I think that he was inaccurate at times. And so I think that a lot of people think it's going to be Pine, and that's definitely going to be the case, but I'm not so sure it is. And I know as coaches, missed reads are not a good situation because that's when interceptions happen, and Lord knows this team cannot turn the ball over. And I think that that's a big part of it. But you also have to look at the situation and say, look, guys, who's moving the ball? Which quarterback is moving the team when they're in the game? Which quarterback's moving the team? And so, to me personally, if they lose, or I mean, if they start Cone, I'm scratching my head. I just don't see the reasoning behind it. I understand why they would because it's a game on the road, but we've seen what happens when you play a guy that just isn't effective. And do you waste 3-4 series hoping to see if this guy can be effective? Because when you're playing a team that's good and you're playing them at their house, you're not going to get a lot of opportunities to score. So I think that it's just a wasted opportunity, and that's what you got to be worried about. Go ahead, John.
I would just quickly say, look, there's 7 games this season. I fully expect all 3 of those guys to still have to play incredibly meaningful snaps for Notre Dame over the course of what's left of this season. I just think it's inevitable for as good of injury luck as we saw Notre Dame have a year ago, and a lot of teams really dealt with some significant injuries, I think because of reduced contact for COVID and any other number of reasons. We saw Notre Dame stay remarkably healthy. Notre Dame's been really cursed this season by injuries. And so for injuries or whatever reasons, I still fully expect that Notre Dame will have to play Pine and Tyler Buckner and need all 3 of them over the balance of this season.
Probably very true. It probably is. And again, you got a guy, if you play Pine, you got a guy that's 5'11", barely 200 pounds. And if you can't protect him, there's certainly the chance of injury. Ian Book remained healthy, which was pretty amazing, considering he's very similar in size. But a lot of guys that are smaller aren't as, I guess, lucky as Ian Book was when it comes to injuries. Now, Matt, do you think that we'll see Blake Fisher again this year? And any updates on the other injuries like Kevin Bauman or anybody else? What's your thoughts?
In regards to Blake Fisher, I'm not sure you're going to see him this year. I mean, they can't rush him back just because you want him healthy. And if he's ready to go, I think you have to also factor in the red shirt clock that he's on. I mean, is it fair to Blake Fisher to play him 5 games and cost him the year, especially if Notre Dame isn't going to get to the playoffs? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, a wise move for Fisher personally would be to preserve the year. So if he gets hurt again or something else happens later on, he still has that year in his back pocket. As it relates to other guys, I mean, Marist is still on crutches. I didn't see Bauman just because we don't have sideline access anymore pregame. But I believe he was on crutches the last time I saw him. But I mean, I think he's on a 6 to 8 week recovery. So, I mean, he's going to be back at some point this year, which will be good for Notre Dame. But outside of that, I mean, the injuries that they've suffered are pretty bad, and just in terms of Marist, Leofau, and obviously Fisher.
All right, guys, we've seen a good amount of play from the remaining teams on Notre Dame's schedule. We've seen Virginia Tech, we've seen Virginia, we've seen North Carolina, Georgia Tech, all these teams, SC, Stanford. Let's start with you, John. When you look at who's left on the schedule, who do you think is going to really give Notre Dame a challenge when they line up against each other?
Yeah, and following up, just 2 quick things on the end.
Yeah.
I believe Marist has finally transitioned to just a walking boot and maybe been able to shed the crutches, and he's more mobile in just a walking boot at this point. And as it pertains to Blake Fisher, Matt makes a really, really smart and pertinent point. The flip side of that is I believe Blake Fisher is only a 3-year player. So if you don't lose between now and the time you could get him back, I bring Blake Fisher back because it makes you better next year. It keeps a lot in front of you this year, and I think he's only a 3-year player regardless. And this is a year of the 3 years, in my opinion, whether he comes back and plays again or not. I think he has that sort of upside, that sort of potential, and that opportunity to be dominant that whether you get him for 22 games or 24 games the next 2 years or 26 games plus 3 games this year or whatever, I still think when it comes to the 2024 draft, you're still going to be calling Blake Fisher's name in the first round. As it pertains to the opponents, we've seen Stanford be good enough to beat Oregon at home this past weekend when Oregon was the last great best chance for the Pac-12 in the playoffs, in my opinion. And now Oregon can still do it if they went out and are a 12-1 team. But I would be concerned about about Stanford. I'm not as sold on Virginia Tech. They had a nice win to open the season against North Carolina. North Carolina is a team that's not played up to its potential, and I think Virginia Tech still has some issues on both sides of the ball. Southern Cal is really talented, but they're a complete up and down team. That's kind of where I am with those guys. Georgia Tech is another team where you're saying they're good enough to almost beat Clemson, then get blown out, and these other games then lose to Northern Illinois. So I really think that and Virginia can score some points, but Stanford is a game that I would be really concerned about if I'm Notre Dame. Southern Cal has the talent in spots to be problematic for Notre Dame. Those are kind of the two contests that I look at the most.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
I just think UNC and USC still stick out the most to me. Just no matter how good of a defense you have, those offenses can get hot. And Notre Dame will need to score points, and obviously that's kind of been an issue the last couple of weeks. So I think that if they can find a way to run the ball against Virginia Tech, I'd feel a little bit better about those games. But neither North Carolina or USC does well against the run. So I know that's a big ask in a 2-week time span, but on the flip side, I did pick Notre Dame to lose before the season at Virginia. I still think that's possible, but after watching Virginia, I mean, they're a little bipolar. They don't have a good run game at all, and I mean, the quarterback's pretty good, but he's thrown 50-plus times twice, and that's never a good thing, especially if you have those weapons and that offensive line and everything. So I don't think that game concerns me as much as it did before this season, but obviously they're still good enough to beat Notre Dame, but John brings up a great point on Stanford. They're playing some pretty good ball, but also shout out to John for that quick math on Blake Fisher's potential games left at Notre Dame. That's very impressive.
All right, Matt. I want to get some recruiting question out of you too. Obviously, you are heavily involved in recruiting for us for the site. I wanted to get your sense of where 2022 is right now, and if you feel like they'll close strong in 2022, and also how do you see 2023 shaping up right now?
I think 2022 is a wild card right now. I think Notre Dame's testing the waters of some guys committed to other schools right now. So, I mean, that's kind of a wait and see thing if they'll visit and whatnot. As it relates to 22 as a whole, I think they'll need to do something sooner than later in terms of offers just because that early signing period is coming quick. But it's also important to get good evals on these kids because, I mean, that's probably why they don't have an offer is Notre Dame's trying to evaluate them and see what their senior film is like. So I think the bye week will be a really busy recruiting week as the coaches will be out on the road to get those final evaluations and everything that they need to check. So I think you'll see 2022 clear up a bit there. And then obviously with UNC and USC coming to South Bend to finish October, those are going to be huge recruiting weekends. And obviously Xavier and Wonka and some other guys are going to be the headliners at those. So, I mean, it'll be crucial for Notre Dame to impress those kids on the field, but also just to make sure they hit the notes off the field during those visits. 2023, I know that a lot of people were worried about last weekend just with so many top kids being on campus and them experiencing a loss and all that. But I think a win would have helped, no doubt. But I think those specific kids are looking a lot deeper than wins and losses. And I mean, if you've read any of the articles that Christian and I have put up since then, those kids explained what they were looking for. And I mean, they admitted like a win would have been nice, but I mean, Sonny Styles and Luke Montgomery were at Ohio State when they lost to Oregon. And I mean, Ohio State sure as hell not out of the picture for them. So I think it's just kind of a fan reaction, overreaction. I mean, you never want to lose with those guys on campus, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to kill those recruitments. So, but as you mentioned on the board today, the USC game has over 100 kids already set for it, and I mean it's going to be a loaded weekend as well. So I think they're going to have a chance to really make a move with some of these kids when they get back to campus, because they did a great job over the summer getting those kids on campus for the first time.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it all unfolds because we'll see some new names. I think that we'll see some new names in 2022 as well pop up here in the next probably 3-4 weeks. We'll see some new names and then see where they stand with that. And I don't know. I like where they're headed, but so many of these guys are very, very important. And if they land them, it's going to be one heck of a class. If they don't, then we'll just have to see where it goes. All right. Well, we got a whole bunch of questions from people in the chat. So we're going to start here with Tom Singer's got his first question. And it's the O-line. Is the O-line a talent issue, or can they really improve that much with the experience this year? What do you guys think? John, what do you think?
Well, I would think that they're going to continue to get better each and every week. I think we've seen glimpses. Again, we get to see a very generous amount of practice in August. And I talked to reporters around the way covering up their major programs. University of Florida got 0 August access. So we got to see a lot of the offensive line in August. And I left August saying I was a little concerned about the O-line, a little concerned about the speed at the second and third levels of the Notre Dame defense, and that was before all the injuries. I bring all that up to say I do believe there's an ability and an expectation that that group will continue to get better. Some of those guys have also had 2 to 3 years now to develop and to be more prepared to be a central part of this offensive line, and they're not ready. There's a guy like Blake Fisher who is probably a bit of a unicorn in terms of his talent, but he's still being counted on from day one in terms of when the season kicked off to produce, and that's because some other guys hadn't come along the way expected. So I think the offensive line can get better, but I still think that the best days of a Joe Alt and Blake Fisher and those guys are going to be in 2022 and beyond, and not 2021.
You got Matt. You're smiling. What do you got to say over there?
Yeah, I can't see Matt. That's not fair.
This chat's wild.
Yeah, I know. There's some good questions in here.
Jess Bryce is in here.
Yeah, I saw that. John's wife's in here. All right, hang on. Let's throw this one up here. Question is, I have a question for Matt. What's it like to work with John Bryce?
I have seen some interesting coworker situations, but I do have to say that working with John Bryce is one of the greatest blessings of my life. He's an experienced vet that has over 20 years on the SEC beat, which is a brutal beat. And I mean, John's also seen quite a bit of bad football covering Tennessee. So I think he adds great perspective when Notre Dame fans freak out about a loss or a bad performance, because I think he has that perspective of just seeing what an awful football team looks like. So I think he can bring some realization and some reality back to the equation. But in the press box, John's great. He's always got his eyes in the right places. He adds a little bit of humor. And I mean, he doesn't talk too much, and that's good, because some of the employees that Mike has hired in the past have driven me crazy by talking too much and talking some nonsense and putting coaches on the hot seat. So I have no complaints about John Bryce.
We're not going to mention names. On those other people. Go ahead, John.
I would just say, it does the day of the week, as long as it ends in Y. We know that Matt is full of it. But no. One quick point about recruiting that I just want to bring up is that there's some significant heat on some big time programs, and LSU's front and center for me. And Ed Orgeron is on incredibly tenuous ground down on the Bayou, and I really think they have a great chance to lose this week at Kentucky. I bring that up to say I think Notre Dame still has a chance to make some significant noise, depending on the coaching dominoes around the country in the 2022 class, because Southern Cal is already open. You really don't think Southern Cal can have somebody in place until the very earliest days of December on a normal time frame. Look at all the drama surrounding LSU. There are other major Power 5 programs with some drama. And so for all of that, I think Notre Dame still can make some noise in 2022. I think Notre Dame is a little bit more aggressive in a lot of ways in its recruiting right now. And I would say that, to Matt's point, a lot of times I don't like people, but I do like working with Matt.
All right, we got our next question. Nobody talks about Houston Griffith. I see him out of position and taking poor angles often. He's the least of our worries, though. I don't know if he's the least of our worries, but it's certainly not the worst situation. But I agree. I haven't seen him make a lot of plays. Any thoughts from you, Matt?
I think he's just kind of a guy that's out there. I don't think he's a liability certainly, but I don't think he's a kid that's going to make a lot of plays. I do think that some of the recruiting misses in the past at the safety position have kind of put Notre Dame in that position. I do think Houston Griffith and DJ Brown not kind of taking that next step forward has kind of limited what I guess how aggressive Marcus Freeman can be with Kyle Hamilton. I know that he's sent him on blitzes here and there, but you still have to protect that back end. And I think if they had another playmaker back at safety, I think it could open up the defense a little bit more. But I mean, I have obviously no complaints with how they've used Kyle Hamilton either. They've put him in different positions and kind of done the most with what they can do, just considering the circumstances.
All right. Next question, is Michael Mayer going to play against Virginia Tech? He looked really hobbled on Saturday. An incredible effort by him to try and stay out there, but I'm worried about his health. Matt, do you have anything? And if you don't, I can add something.
I mean, I think he'll play. I mean, I think they'll be cautious with him. I don't think you'll see him running down the seam every play, but I think there's ways to kind of get around that.
Yep. All right. Once again, folks, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer them. Also, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you click on the subscribe button. We'd greatly appreciate it. So, Buccos is starting to troll you, Matt, so we're not going to put that one up.
Shout out Buccos, though. That guy's always so kind to me on the message boards, and he's sitting here all capsing my name in this chat. So
yeah, well,
I got to give a major shout out to Buccos.
He's just more of a butt kisser. That's all he is. He's a brown nose.
I don't care what it is. I like it. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Urban Meyer will get fired first.
Wow, you think so?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think PJ Fleck's on the hot seat, so.
Well, he may be. You just never know. All right,
Urban put himself on the hot seat.
He did, yes. Next question. Why did Freeman run the prevent defense during Cincinnati? Guys got any thoughts on that?
I mean, you have to run prevent at certain points of the game. I mean, it's ridiculous not to at points. They just got to be better at executing it. I mean, plain and simple.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I don't particularly like the dollar defense. I think that the statistics show it's not very effective. Your thoughts? Anything from you, John?
I would just say that I think we're seeing more and more every week that this Marcus Freeman defense is best on the attack. And I want to see this team continue to attack more and more, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because that's what the dudes talk about loving about Marcus's defense is the freedom, the speed that they play, the aggressiveness, and I think that's what that's made for. Now, you can argue to the earlier question about Houston Griffith and some of those other guys, maybe they're playing that because they don't have other playmakers aside from Kyle Hamilton identified, and because Maris Leofau was going to be what I think was the break player in college for the deep side of the ball this year is injured. But don't ever lose that aggression, in my opinion, because the aggression and a lot of the things Marcus does to get his team playing so hard are what makes him special. And so I'm always going to err on the side of being aggressive.
I agree. I love the aggressive approach. All right, next question here. Have you heard anything on the freshman defensive backs? What do you got, Matt?
I haven't really heard anything on them, to be honest with you. I think Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley were guys that kind of impressed them early, and then I had heard some good things coming out of camp about JoJo Johnson before he tore his ACL, so that was kind of unfortunate. I do think that Notre Dame's going to have to move one of those guys to safety just for the future. So I don't think that would be a bad thing if they moved like a Ryan Barnes there now to kind of get him in the flow and even potentially get him in the game. So, but I mean, none of them are playing or close to seeing live game reps at this point. But that could change with Ramon Henderson kind of having a bad game on special teams on Saturday. So that could have opened the door for one of those guys to potentially get more reps. But overall, I think Ramon Henderson's played pretty well, and that's kind of allowed them to keep those freshmen off the field.
All right. Folks, if you got any more questions, go ahead and pop them in chat. Otherwise, we're going to have one more question for the guys, and then we'll close it down. The last topic I wanted to mention, guys, obviously on Friday we give our picks, we give our thoughts about the game and that type of thing, but how you feeling right now? We don't know. We'll probably find out some more details about who's healthy, who's not, who's going to start, that type of thing. But, I mean, if you had to pick right now, how do you think Notre Dame's going to do in this game? Let's start with you, JB.
I still like the overall leadership of the Notre Dame program. I still like the stability of the Notre Dame program, and I still like what Notre Dame has from the top down. And so you're talking about a Virginia Tech program that yes, it turned a lot of heads with winning that opening game against North Carolina when North Carolina looked completely abysmal and not ready to play. But it's the same Virginia Tech team that very nearly got ran off the field at West Virginia, which in turn just lost to Texas Tech, I believe. And Texas Tech just had 70 hung on it by Texas. And so I still think Notre Dame's the more complete program. I still fully expect Notre Dame to be the more polished and mature program in this game. Look, it's going to be crazy in Lane Stadium. Blacksburg will be rocking. They get up for these games. They especially get up for a team like Notre Dame. I just think there's some secondary motivation there for Virginia Tech and some angst there, and they were really close to winning at Notre Dame a couple of years ago. But I like Notre Dame in this game. I continue to like Notre Dame's matchups until they give me reason to not like their matchups. And look, they turned it over 3 times in 3 of the worst possible situations last week, and yet had all the momentum in the world and should have been down 17-14 with a chance to get a defensive stop and go knock off Cincinnati. So I still think Notre Dame is the more complete team, the better team with better talent.
All right, Matt, final thoughts from you.
I mean, first of all, an experienced big journalist like John, I'm surprised he went down that road of comparing game and teams like several times over again. I mean, that's pretty amateur. But regardless of the fact, I think that he brings up a good point about the leadership. I do think Notre Dame has good leadership this year, and that they're definitely going to have to lean on that. It's not going to come from the quarterback position, I don't think, just because of the uncertainty around there. But I think that defensively, they're going to have to carry the team this week. And I mean, I think the lower scoring the game is, I think that's going to be better for Notre Dame this week. So I do expect Notre Dame to go in there and win. It might be super ugly, but I mean, I think the most important thing for Notre Dame is to get that next win and head into the bye week and kind of get rested up, get healthy, and kind of figure some of the little things out to kind of propel them for the rest of the year.
Final rebut there.
I would just say, what a terrible point. If why would you want to see Notre Dame score low points? You should want to see Notre Dame light up the freaking scoreboard like Lee Corso's car in the Lane Stadium parking lot a few years ago when we all saw it get struck by lightning.
This is what I was hoping for. This is what I'm hoping for.
Give me a freaking break.
I'm just saying, if it turns into a shootout, I don't like Notre Dame's chances.
Are you kidding? So you don't think Notre Dame is more talented at the skill spots than Virginia Tech to win in a shootout situation?
I mean, I would like to know who's playing quarterback first.
Well, here's the thing. Also, I think you're being unfair to the group of quarterbacks because, yeah, they're not the leader that Ian Book was, but I think all 3 of those guys resonate with the offensive players and really on either side of the ball because a guy like Jack Cohn came in and was so selfless and did whatever it took to earn his teammates' trust, because a guy like Drew Pine works so freaking hard and is really talked about by guys on both sides of the ball as being a great teammate. And then Tyler Buckner is so freaking talented. And when we talked to those walk-ons, they were talking about how they see it every single day in practice. So, yeah, none of those guys is Ian Book, but they're still good leaders. Don't call them not leaders. And
John, my point there, I wasn't calling them bad leaders. I was just saying that.
No, you said you can't count on them for leadership. You literally said you can't count on them for leadership.
Because they don't know.
That's unfair.
The quarterback situation.
You don't have to be the star player to lead.
See, this is what our chats are like. This is why. John, this is why I wanted to do this more than anything. Go ahead, Matt.
William Matz in the comments has the greatest quote: "Winning is hard." Leave it at that. Winning is hard.
He's exactly right. But you shouldn't hope to score a few points. Score as many freaking points as you can.
I just think the strength of this team is the defense. So if they're giving up a lot of points, that's not a favorable thing for Notre Dame.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to have a whole lot of more of that in the future. Whole reason I wanted to bring these two on because this is what they do pretty much all day, every day, and I get such a kick out of it. So hope you enjoyed that, folks. And once again, if you aren't familiar with Irish Sports Daily, just go to irishsportsdaily.com. We got plenty of free stories. You can kind of get an idea of what we do. And also, if you're on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe and subscribe to it so you can always find our videos. They'll show up in your notifications, the little bell thing at the top. And thanks for stopping by. We'll be back next Wednesday with this group. And then, of course, we will be there for Saturday's game. After the game, Jamie and I will be together for an hour after that. And then we'll have Sean Milligan come on the second hour to talk about offensive line and get his thoughts on, he's a guy who started 2 years, would have been a 3-year starter and NFL player had he not blown his back out, but and he also coaches at a very, very high level in Chicago as an offensive line coach. So looking forward to get Sean's opinion on what's going on at offensive line as well. Thanks for being here, folks, and we'll talk to you again real soon. I hope you really enjoyed this. Go ahead.
Playoff baseball time.
All right, I know. John's got to get going. All right, we'll see you guys.
That's all I got.
Take care, man.